Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. Where's my microphone? There it is. Where today I want to talk to you all about one of my very favorite bands. And this is Manfred Mann's Earth Band. Now, this is a band that should have been in the prog rock pantheon, along with your Yeses, your ELPs, your Genesises, your Jethro Tulls, your King Crimsons. And don't get me wrong, they sold a lot of records very consistently throughout the 70s and into the 80s, but they were never as big as those other bands, but they should have been. Now, they were formed by South African born Manfred Mann in London after he had already had huge success, particularly in England, as the leader of a band just called Manfred Mann. Now, here's where it gets complicated. So, the man was called Manfred Mann, and the man's band was called Manfred Mann, and they played pop music like Do or Diddy, and a lot of other really well-known pop songs. Um, My name is Jack and I live in the back. Really, really fun, catchy stuff. But by the end of the 60s, Manfred Mann wanted a different band. So he started a sort of real sort of psychedelic, jazzy, fusiony, avant-garde-ish band called Manfred Mann's Chapter 3. And it was his second big band. And they came out with two albums that were really good, but then he settled on a compromise, something a bit more rock and a bit less avant-garde, but very progressive with very cool arrangements and long songs that allowed for great improvisational development. And this was Manfred Mann's Earth Band. And it was with the Earth Band that Manfred Mann really got to do everything he really ought to have done. It was great, moody, stylistically luring and endearing, very much cinematic at times, very much mysterious, wonderful moods, great solos, great original material, and great cover songs. They covered so many songs and did to them, they really turned them inside out with the covers. There was a Bob Dylan song called Father of Day, Father of Night, and they turn it into a psychedelic prog rock masterpiece. And this is from the Solar Fire album. Um, the next album, Nightingales and Bombers, wow. Visionary Mountain, what a way to open to open a song, open up an album. Again, having a Joe Biden moment here, folks. But their most famous cover, and they did a lot of Springsteen stuff, and they did what I suppose a lot of Springsteen fans would consider mutilation, but what Manfred Mann fans consider absolute genius. And this was, of course, their version of Blinded by the Light, which gave them a somewhat extended flirtation with the big time, because it really was a huge single in spite of its length. Some FM stations would play the whole thing, guitar and keyboard solo and all. And of course, did I say the name? It is Blinded by the Light. And a lot of people argue, did this song become a hit because of the great musicianship, because of the great hook, because of the toe tapping rhythm, or did it become a hit because a vocal line that Chris Hamlet sung was maybe intentionally or unintentionally pronounced funny. So the real line, and this wasn't even the original line, but the line that Chris sung was "Blinded by the light, revved up like a deuce," as in Little Deuce Coupe, um, another runner in the night. What people think that they heard was "Blinded by the light, wrapped up like a douche," another runner in the night. Whatever the lyric was, it got people's attention. But they were obviously a band that was destined to do even more cool covers. I Came for You appeared on a future album, on another Springsteen number, and they really did have this knack as a band. And Manfred Mann, on his keyboards and leadership role in particular, they had this knack for taking songs by artists that you would not associate with progressive rock or improvisational rock and do things to them that made them prog rock and improvisational rock masterworks. And I'm really telling you that all of their albums, from their debut till the early 80s album Somewhere in Africa, were classics. After that, album releases became a bit more sporadic. There was still good stuff, but it was that classic 1970 to around about 83 period where everything they did, and I mean everything, was great. Not really a bad song on any of the albums, not a bad album, even when they changed lead singers halfway through that period from Mick Rogers to Chris Hamlet, they retained a core of genius. And they even had a connection to AC/DC because, of course, they had the same drummer whose name is escaping me because, again, I'm having one of those moments, but we're going to look that up for you now because he's actually one of my favorite drummers, particularly in the rock world. So I'm just going to get that up for you. The Chris Slade, of course. So Chris Slade later on played with AC/DC. He also played in another one of my favorite bands from the 80s, The Firm, which featured Jimmy Page on guitar, Bad Company's Paul Rogers on vocals, and Mark Franklin, a wonderful fretless bass player. Some would argue the quintessential fretless rock bass player. So Manfred Mann was serious stuff, and it was really good stuff. I actually think it's some of the best driving music ever. If you like prog rock and like to drive fast, listen to this. And so YouTube's algorithm doesn't crush me. Always drive the speed limit, or just move to Germany where there is no speed limit. But I heard there are other restrictions. But you know, nowhere's perfect and no one's perfect. But Manfred Mann came very, very close. Like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. And listen to your Manfred Mann. Until then, take care.